Good morning, everybody, and we're just waiting for everyone to come on board the Streetworks Conference of 2020. I'm just waiting for the numbers to build up a little bit, and as people do the join function. And first, I just want to wish you a very good morning indeed on Tuesday, 24th November. What a momentous day for us as our first digital event, as it were, of Streetworks UK. Good. We're just building the numbers up. That's fine. I know broadly the numbers we're expecting to get, and I can see that we have the participants on the panel as well. So that's all working great. Excellent. Right. Well, good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome indeed for those of you who haven't met me before. My name is Clyde Bairstow, CEO of Streetworks UK, and interesting for me to reflect upon the fact now being in the role almost 2.5, approaching 3 years. And let me first just go over some domestics for the next few days, and as you join in. First of all, for the wise amongst you, can see that we are recording the session. It's the red button to the top left-hand side of your Zoom screen. Also, we are provisioning the ability to use the chat tote to ask questions over this next period as well. When I say use a chat tote, can I please ask you to merely ask questions in the chat tote, and please don't attempt to answer them. That just makes it really harder to find what the new and interesting questions are that are being made by you. But what I would like you to do, if the opportunity presents itself or something is really important to you, do use the chat tote during the 3 days to point to any subjects you'd like us to pick up over this period, because we can insert a special if needed. And after all, responsiveness in this environment is obviously the key for us as much as it is for you. I wanted to just mention, look, we don't have any JAG colleagues this year. It's very much an internal audience, and that is deliberate because there are some internal things that I think we need to discuss and pare down on, which this year we're just keeping slightly separate and focusing on reflecting on COVID in terms of what those differences make. As you see behind me on the wallpaper, we have 2 sponsors today, Atkins Global and relatively new member, CBE. We'll be hearing more from them filleted in during the next few days or so. But first of all, let me start just by reflecting upon, since the conference last year in November 2019, clearly it's been a busy year. And, obviously we had quite a few challenges in mind at that stage. I don't plan to, go through a blow-by-blow account of what those were, but I think it's probably useful just to quickly reflect on some of the progress that's been made. And after all, in a sense, you've got to know where you've come from to know where best to go. I suppose the headline thing we tend to talk about a lot at the conference last year was over Street Manager. I think very broadly, that's been landed within all your organizations. I think there's been a lot of good troubleshooting, and I think there's been a lot of good cross-department working inside your companies, which I think has been really good, from areas that probably wouldn't traditionally be involved, IT departments and other areas like that, and where effectively operations and areas come together, and that's been good. And overall, I think our reflection is it's been actually quite a reasonably successful project, despite the gloomsters of amongst some of us in terms of what was to come there. And a lot of that's down to the hard work that's been put in by our expert practitioner groups and people involved with that directly. I think the other thing that's worth touching on is SRH 4th edition. I think overall, we've seen the right answer. And at the end of the day, what's important to me about that is that certainly, in a counterpoint to SROR at this stage, it's certainly strongly encouraging innovation, which and seems to have landed at the right answer, certainly in the short term, in terms of guarantee periods. The other thing that's obviously was hot on our lips this time last year was lane rental. The wider rollout of that now, underway. I think we've done a good job in terms of setting expectations, providing help with those consultations. But of course, it is something that we have yet to master in the wider country, that the rollout and lay down is as we would wish. Great work done on the coordination code, which has very much been landed by Samantha Brothwell and all the team involved in that work, and great plaudits to them. And then I suppose about 3 or 4, pretty major projects that have been ongoing for several years, off and on. The EA work, trials analysis completed, a protocol developed and established, and now we're at a final stage with the EA in terms of charting that forward and having some very successful meetings. You'll hear more about that during the course of the next 3 days or so. Hawk training and accreditation has worked through some pretty unpleasant hurdles over this last period, but in terms of stiffening up our approach to the AOs, I'm very confident that we will get to a digital version as well as a paper version in the early part of 2021. Behind Hawk TNA and some of the good work that's been done there, some good, shall we say, synergy on the safety side as well, together with Hawk app, and that's now in the final stages of development, now completed and ready to relaunch and get out there and give people a real increment in terms of what they do. And I suppose last and not least, at this stage last year, we were just starting at that stage to talk about the vision, and that's commenced. And indeed, only this morning, I've had my first, we say, pledge note from a large PLC going, we totally get what you're saying here, and we wish to support you in terms of going forward with that. And we will roll that out and get more of that endorsed support by your member companies, by the member companies, whether that's contractors, and indeed whether that's utilities or affiliates. But I suppose offset and overlaying all this, clearly in everyone's mind, is the rapidity of the onset of COVID-19. I guess everything changed, basically on a week-by-week basis for us from the 20th of March onwards. I am very conscious that many of you sat there in front of your screens today, amongst our members, also have been at not inconsiderable personal stress at work, whether that be furlough, the uncertainty that remains, and in some cases even redundancy. On top of that, I recognize it's changed your work patterns, whether that be peace and quiet for some, but isolation for others, and we recognize that. I think the other thing, as we reflect upon the COVID aspect, is that in terms of national risk register, this was not an unknown. But nonetheless, some broad things of great utility came out of it. I would reflect upon, probably strongest of which has been the DFT grouping and the setting up the weekly meeting. I think a good initiative by DFT. What I think we have witnessed there is probably one of the most collaborative efforts of utilities, contractors, JAG, and our affiliates, frankly, ever assembled in what was in short order and rolled out. And I must in particular pay tribute to Peter Loft here for corralling the cats amongst other people at Hawk England, and using it also as a wider national platform to help shape thinking in Wales and Scotland, and vice versa. I think actually that's helped hugely to understand the different patterns and approaches that have been taken in the devolved areas as well. But I'll come back to that in a second. I think the other thing that's been quite interesting about it has been the establishment of the firm principle of street works as essential workers. And I think what I have witnessed is a DFT that's been incredibly sensible, in all this area, and working across the government departments to do that. I think collectively, we should be proud of what's been achieved over this COVID period. We kept the energy flowing, kept the water running, and the broadband and telco services have been kept going. And then on top of that, a few things have emerged through the mist at the same time. The announcements over the infrastructure build for HS2, And then the things that directly have evolved out of COVID, the importance of that and the green agenda around active travel, the sheer changing of travel patterns and road use that's occurred. And more recently, we've seen the green recovery revolution, as it were, announced in the last couple of days or week, in fact. And the importance of EV use and then gigabit demands through, the educational areas of our populations and not least 5G insertion and everything else. What are my overall observations about this particular period? Well, I said I'd refer back to this. I think the complexity of devolution has not been helped. But to be honest with you, it is what it is, and it's for us to, as an organisation, just to deal with it, recognising the different challenges that necessitates. I think it's also, if I reflect back about this last 6 or 9 months or so, is that necessity to really strongly argue the utility by utility case, but also act as a collective. I think that stood us in good stead by standing as a collective body of utilities. I think it's also thrown to sharp reflection some of those things about explaining to the public what we do and why we do it. And I think we're getting better at that, better and better on a weekly basis. I think the government itself are pretty clear on the vitality of service, and I think that's a good thing that's come out of it. But I suppose there are some unintended consequences of street work. Sometimes the grand policy doesn't actually make and help us as utilities on the ground. And I think that's something, for example, reduced lanes to work in and obscuring areas where we can work has not been helpful. I think the other profound thing we've seen is where the highways and local authorities bureaucracy can be reduced, and indeed the spirit of playfair, as has been noted in the words and the circulation, has been made a realism. And one of our big challenges, in my view, is to lock that in. We can see it ebbing or eddying away gently already in some areas, but we've got to keep that spirit of cooperation close and working together. I think the other things I'm conscious of is the lead times to close stuff down is pretty low, but sometimes the lead times to restart stuff takes time, and that can strongly affect street works. And then overall, I think what has been, I think, done well is our communication to members in terms of what to focus on, what's coming up, and I think that's worked well. I think over this period, we've seen us develop Streetworks as an organization. Over the time of this, since the last conference, we've welcomed some new telco members, about 4 or 5 new ones. And that really just helps our reputation as a wider Streetworks organization. I think we continue to improve the voice of what we have in terms of our social media, and more on that later on as we go through the conference. And I think we've established a secretariat role much more strongly within Streetworks. And overall, I think, the voice for the industry in terms of launching the vision of Streetworks 2025 has been a powerful thing. Not only has it brought together the other government departments to see it through our lens, whether that be DEFRA, DCMS and BEIS, and we'll hear more of that shortly, but also that focus upon those things that are important to it: digitalization, innovation skills, collaboration, the environment. It speaks very strongly to all of the companies and membership offices, senior officers that I'm talking to. Well, look, over the next 3 days then, got an exciting and far-reaching program. Today, we're moving away from our more traditional opener of DFT and getting a sense from one of the other government departments of the bow wave of national investment bearing down on our sector. And that's something we need to be, very alive to, and I know many of us are. I think what you will hear is a criticality of what we all do is well recognized. Later on this PM, we've got Clive Bairstow from CEO of Openreach, giving the utility end of the telescope at the boardroom level and looking at the forward policy implications for him, being one of the largest utility PLCs in the UK. Short break, and then later on this afternoon, we do have a good panel set up with actually a JAG colleague coming to that one with Samantha Brothwell and DFT, just to bring this whole thing into focus. Tomorrow, building on this work with a first focus on one of our planks of the vision, digitalization, We've got Holger from the NUAR, Simon Top from Elgin, and Kat from Scottish PDG, really divining what will really help us make a difference in digitalization for you and for our our customers all, and bring us all up to speed also tomorrow on the EA work that's been going on. And then Thursday morning, Baroness Veer, the Minister for Roads, Buses and Places, which will roll into a session on workforce needs and how we can really help with this skills issue, how we can really transform the shortage of skills that we are likely to see in the sector. And also on Thursday, a second bite at the policy landscape and some excavated waste workshop stuff to cover us as well. On Friday, I guess we will underscore all our people's good work with some prize announcements on the website and going out on an array of social media channels in our awards ceremony, which will be virtual this year, as you know. So good. Let's have some great engagement from you, please, in the chat, Tote. And again, a warm thanks to Atkins and Scooby, you know, the two members who have kindly agreed to sponsor the conference, and I say we'll be hearing from them. Well, look, now for this next session coming up, Matt Warman has unavoidably in the last couple of days, in fact, been drawn away, and it's probably not unrecognizable what he might very well be drawn into discussion with the Prime Minister today. In absence of that, what he has actually done is pre-recorded a session which lasts for about 15 minutes, a period he was going to speak for. In fact, it's a bit less than that, about 9 minutes. And then we've got Richard Maddock, who from DCMS, who was here to helpfully field any of the questions that you might have that are, if you like, of a non-parliamentary nature. Richard Maddock is no stranger to many of you, I know, as he has been fulsome in support in terms of streetworks and DCMS approach to that elsewhere. So look, without more ado, what I'd like to do, because it's a pretty profound talk that Matt Warman is going to give. For those of you who don't know, he was elected to Parliament only in 2015. Previous to that, he worked with the Daily Telegraph for about 15 years as a tech journalist, and since July 19, he's been the Undersecretary for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and his responsibility is that delivery of, you know, the backbone of the country, the delivery of gigabit-capable broadband. So without more ado, I'll turn to Joel and the Secretariat and invite him just to roll that video, and we can just hear some words, and we'll follow up after that with Richard. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to join you all at this year's virtual Streetworks UK conference. The telecom sector is playing a vital role in ensuring everyone stays online. Classrooms have moved online, friends and families are staying connected through a variety of digital technologies, and British businesses continue to power the economy through this difficult time. These recent months have shown that digital connectivity is more important than ever, and it is digital infrastructure that will play a key role in driving our economic recovery. I was delighted when colleagues across the sector were recognised for their achievements in the Queen's Birthday Honours List. From engineers working in the community to help people stay connected, to operational leads ensuring services could continue, you all play an important role in helping us continue through these unprecedented times. I want to thank not just those telecoms members with us today, but also the entire Streetworks sector for the invaluable work you have done to keep the country connected. That's regardless of whether that is digitally or not. The leadership shown by Streetworks UK, together with the Joint Authorities Group, the JAG, and the Highways Authorities and Utilities Committee, the HAWK, in partnership with the government, has provided clarity and certainty to both industry and authorities since March. I'd like to extend further thanks to Clive and indeed to David Capon of JAG and David Latham and Peter Loft of the HAWK for the role they have played. I'd like to highlight, though, the work government is doing to achieve gigabit connectivity, to emphasise the critical role of Streetworks in delivering this, and to talk about what we are doing to reduce barriers to deployment. So, starting with gigabit connectivity, we remain committed to delivering the nationwide gigabit connectivity we all need as soon as possible. And this is a challenging ambition, but we are already making great progress as a country, with more than 1 in 3 homes now being able to access that gigabit connectivity. According to Think Broadband's latest figures, over 5.4 million premises can access full fibre broadband, an increase of more than 2.4 million premises from this time last year. And despite the impact of COVID-19, we expect gigabit coverage will continue to increase. We've seen £7.4 billion of private funding already announced in rolling out gigabit broadband networks, and I'm delighted by the competition that is now emerging in the sector. Along with Virgin Media's upgrade its existing cable network, we expect more than half of the nation will have gigabit coverage by the end of next year. But I want to ensure that the right conditions are in place to make sure this investment goes as far as it possibly can in connecting us all to gigabit speeds. And this is all, of course, in addition to the government's upcoming investment of £5 billion in the UK gigabit programme, which will deliver better connectivity to the least commercial areas of the UK. We've also made great strides in improving mobile coverage. Thanks to our landmark shared rural network agreement with the mobile network operators, the first of its kind in the world, 95% of the UK will have 4G coverage by the end of 2025. And we're working to embrace new technology as well. We'll be one of the earliest adopters of 5G coverage, with the majority of the population able to access 5G by 2027. I'm pleased that all 4 mobile network operators have launched their 5G networks, which are now available in over 100 UK towns and cities. The role of the Streetworks industry and of Streetworks UK is crucial to all of this. It's vital that we all work together to achieve gigabit-capable connectivity across the UK, and that we harness both the telecoms and Streetworks industry to deliver this. Now, some of you may be surprised to see a DCMS minister speaking at the Streetworks UK annual conference, but this is recognition of the increasingly important role that Streetworks plays in delivering the digital priorities of this government. All of you here today are responsible for the deployment of nationally critical infrastructure, whether that's broadband, heat networks, or electric vehicle charging stations, or essential upgrades to existing infrastructure. So whilst my ministerial focus is on delivering the broadband networks this country needs, the government is looking forward to closer engagement with the Streetworks industry as a whole over the coming years. Indeed, it is the Prime Minister's priority to build the infrastructure needed to put the UK in the best position moving forward. Clive Bairstow and I have previously discussed the challenges associated with rolling out broadband networks. Streetworks alone accounts for some 70% of the cost of rolling out this infrastructure. And while civil engineering is naturally an expensive undertaking, this government is committed to making Streetworks as efficient as it possibly can be. Now, you will all be aware of the introduction of the 4th specification for the reinstatement of openings in highways in May. Although this does not become statutory until next year, it delivers a range of benefits for infrastructure providers. For example, a specification for micro-trenching and an updated street manager is another major change the government has delivered. This will allow greater standardisation of numerous processes, including permitting, and it will also bring an unprecedented level of accountability to all parties. Both these factors are critical in driving performance and collaboration. My colleague at Baroness Veer, I'm sure, will discuss this in much more detail on Thursday. And my officials within the Barrier Busting Task Force are also speaking to every highway authority individually across the whole country to discuss digital infrastructure deployment and to highlight best practice, including the Streetworks Toolkit, which we first published 2 years ago. However, we are not stopping there. We are continuing to look at reforms that will benefit both industry and highways authorities. So I'm delighted that Openreach and Sheffield City Council will be trialling a new flexi permit system next month. The government has been working with key stakeholders, including Streetworks UK, in developing this policy, and I look forward to following the trial closely. And I am, of course, delighted that a broadband project was chosen for this. I'd like to thank JAG for the pivotal role they have played in facilitating this. A skilled workforce, though, is absolutely vital for ensuring every corner of the UK can access gigabit connectivity. Our collective ambitions for next-generation connectivity will create thousands of opportunities for jobs across the telecom sector, just as many people are finding their livelihoods disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's my hope that upgrading our network for the future will help our recovery from the virus that we are facing today. The Chancellor has already announced a number of interventions that fund training and create long-term employment opportunities and work placements, such as the Kickstart scheme, as part of this government's plan for jobs. My department is working closely with the Treasury and the Department for Education to ensure these initiatives work for the sector and for all those sectors that DCMS deals with. We'd like to work together with industry so that you can use these schemes where necessary to attract and train British talent and to help unemployed people back into the job market as we recover from COVID-19. It's important that we work together to make the UK a world leader in digital infrastructure, resilient to the challenges of the future. So thank you for inviting me to speak at the conference. I hope you will enjoy the sessions, particularly with Baroness Beer and Clive Selling. I look forward to working with both Clives and many of you in the room over the coming years. Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, thank you on behalf of Streetworks, Richard. Richard, did you want to pop your camera on now? And we will proceed forward. Richard, why don't you just go ahead for those who don't know you and just introduce yourself in terms of what you do and where you sit within DCMS.
Sure thing. Thanks, Clive, and good to be here. So I'm Richard Maddock, Head of Streetworks and Local Government at DCMS, but more specifically within the department's barrier busting team, which was created a few years ago by Matt Hancock to look at increasing the pace and reducing the cost of digital infrastructure rollout. So that's not just the fixed line side of the fence, but it's also mobile infrastructure as well. So the kind of things we work on in addition to Streetworks include wayleaves, new build developments, mobile planning laws, and the Electronic Communications Code. And we've got a number of legislative priorities, and in fact we've got a bill going through Parliament at the moment that looks at wayleaves. So quite a lot going on, yeah, very much looking forward to delivering on some of the stuff we've been talking about over the next few years.
Richard, thank you very much for that. Well, look, it was great to hear the Minister's endorsement of all the great work being done by, Streetworks teams across the country. If I pick out some of his mantras, reflecting upon the government priorities for build, 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 and indeed the critical role that Streetworks delivers on that. And interesting for us to hear him speak so strongly about the skills workforce, and I suppose in particular, to your sector, that's of the Streetworks crew, that's an important bit. But perhaps I could just kick the questions off, really, because I know you have been at the heart of some of our work in this area from the start. The Minister touched on the barrier busting task force. What are the barriers going forward that you see at the moment that are foremost in your mind? And perhaps you could share with us any of your evolving work that's probably coming into the next iteration of the toolkit, if that's still your intention. So what are the foremost barriers you see, and where do you see and how do you see that shaping the toolkit?
So I'm going to keep my answer to Streetworks issues. So the Minister alluded to the huge amount of private investment that we've seen going in, which is absolutely fantastic. It shows great confidence in the market. I think a challenge, so this poses opportunities as well as challenges. And I think one of the challenges is the scalability of these private enterprises and, of course, in delivering government's aims. So I think we need to ensure that the ambition is there. We need to ensure that we have the infrastructure to match the scaling required to hit some of these targets. And so a key part of that on industry side is the old chestnut of reinstatements and getting things right first time. because we know that's really the cornerstone of relationships between highways authorities and industry. So I think from the industry side, I'd say that's one challenge that we all need to look at and embrace. In terms of legislation and legislation and regulation, a lot has of course happened this year already, but as the Minister alluded to, we're not stopping there. So we are looking at simplifying permit schemes, simplifying traffic management schemes. I know that Anthony and Sally over at DFD have done a huge amount and are continuing to do a huge amount of work on this. And I'm sure that you guys will hear a lot of what we are planning to do over the next few months. And of course, we're looking at new innovative solutions, for example, the flexi permit scheme. So I'm particularly keen on working with David Capon over at JAG and also the teams at Sheffield and Openreach, just to have a look at how we can be as ambitious as possible on that proposal, because it's one that really ticks boxes for both highways authorities and industry. So a few points there, happy to go into detail on any of those.
No, that's helpful, and that lays out the territory, reasonably well for us. Can you just tell us a little bit about the next version of the toolkit in terms of how that's shaping up at the moment? Where is that just now?
Yeah, so we were thinking about publishing an updated version around about now, actually, in November. But because of the kind of positive changes we're seeing around flexi permits, we thought it might be a little bit foolish to publish something now and then have something brand new, such as flexi permits, perhaps come in quite early next year. And this government is ambitious to reducing the barriers to rollout. So what we are doing is we're seeing where that trial goes. We're seeing how ambitious we can be with that trial and what we can do in terms of the regulations. But a Streetworks toolkit will quickly follow any changes we do make next year.
Okay, thanks for that. The Minister touched on there this issue to do with not just broadband, but also reminded us about 5G. One of the things that members might wish to hear about is the relative balance or workload between broadband and 5G. Can you give us a sense of the, or maybe you can't, but can you give us a sense of what if broadband is a thing of the present time, just helps our conversation with Clive Bairstow later on, how big is the 5G backhaul load of work that we would expect from that? Is it just in rough figures? Can you give us a flavour for the scale of those two enterprises, and do they overlap? Are they equal, or how does it feel for us?
In terms of set figures, I don't actually have any to hand, but obviously the mobile aspect of connectivity is as important as the fixed line aspect for us. And indeed, increasingly we're seeing convergence of mobile networks and fixed line networks. I think in terms of real relevance for Streetworks UK and Streetworks UK members, what's fundamental to real 5G is, as you mentioned, a proper backhaul. And a proper backhaul for 5G, we think, would be full fibre. And so in order to get that backhaul in the ground, you need to dig up the ground. And so all the members at Streetworks UK are already assisting with mobile infrastructure deployment. So, there are some issues on the mobile side that are very specific to the mobile side. So the electronic communications code is probably first and foremost when I say that. But all of these mobile operators who are deploying this infrastructure, and also, challenges and other infrastructure providers such as Freshwave and Cellnex, will all need sufficient backhaul. And in most cases, this backhaul is being deployed by contractors, by members of Streetworks UK. And so it is, they kind of go hand in hand. And so it's really critical that we have the mobile deployment projects going on. Well, it's critical that we have the fixed line the fixed line projects going on in order to drive the mobile and real 5G.
Okay, that's helpful. And then now looking forward into 2021, Richard, can you share with us what is what you see as being, as you said, a desk level in terms of the key challenges, and the Minister touched on workforce skills. We'll return to this later, but while we've got you on the screen, can you give us a sense of the challenges you're most concerned about going into 2021 in the Streetworks context, and do you what sort of comfort do you hold in terms of workforce issues going forward?
Okay, a few questions there. I might ask you to repeat some of those in a second, Clive. In terms of my priorities and moving into 2021, what we're going to be doing at a desk level, I think with work on the barrier busting side in terms of streetworks and the partnerships we've had with DFT, we've done a lot of talk about this. We've done a lot of best practice workshops. We've spoken to a lot of industry and highways authorities, but I think the focus now needs to be on delivering some real concrete action. We've done a few bits and bobs again already through the SRH and Street Manager, but my priority for next year is really delivering hard change that benefits all parties, whether that's through supporting DFT where I can and where the team can, but also driving new reforms and ambitious reforms, as I mentioned, the flexi permit scheme, to make sure that's as fit for purpose as it possibly can be. And I think that's a great example for collaboration between highways authorities and operators, because it's a change that will benefit both. The two other questions, remind me.
I was asking you about well, actually, what we will do is because we're short of time, let's address Alison Williams' question, because this is a great question. This one, you see it in the chat there, Richard. The pace of change streetworks in most legislations is pretty slow. Do you think we can move forward fast enough to deliver the huge step change needed to meet the government's ambitions on key infrastructure rollout? I mean, is it a realistic goal from where you sit with the pace of change of legislation? Give us a thought on that.
Yeah, so two immediate responses to that. A year and a half ago, I spoke to pretty much every single Tier 1 authority in the UK, and I'm actually right in the midst of doing that with one of my colleagues, and I can say there has been a massive step change in the approach of authorities, whether that's because messaging from government has gone through, or whether that's because the COVID has really highlighted the importance of digital connectivity. Whatever it is, digital has shot up the agenda for highways authorities, and the improvement is massive. I think we're also seeing some real performance improvement from the industry. I think Street Manager has given us the data to analyze that, and it's fantastic to see that a lot of times when I've spoken to highways authorities, comms have been pointed at as the worst performing kind of sector. I think we can really start putting that to bed, especially with the data I've seen on reinstatement performance, which is great. I think, speaking to the industry as a whole, we're continuing to see build rate increase massively. And so it's a really encouraging place to be in, and it's really encouraging to see those figures rising. I think with regards to getting legislation through Parliament, of course, legislation is always quite a cumbersome thing to get through, but we are seeing some pretty big ambition on the infrastructure side from the Prime Minister, and of course, the things you've been saying about build, build, build. And indeed, the work that DFT have been doing, are doing, and will be doing over the next year, I think it puts us in a really encouraging position.
Okay. And are there any sort of further instruments that are planned to accelerate any of that? Legislation. Is there any plan to try and bring any of your own legislation in? A bit like we have parallel legislations in other government departments to help in this area, or do you still stay focused on DFT's delivery of it in that sense?
So two bits to that. We do have a cross-Whitehall group working together on quickly delivering reforms that are fundamental for infrastructure rollout. In terms of what DCMS is doing, we do have a few legislative priorities that we're looking at. I've alluded to our telecoms infrastructure leasehold property bill that's going through Parliament. That will help with accessing MDUs, multi-dwelling units. We've committed to legislation for new book connectivity next year, and we will be shortly consulting on whether changes to the electronic communications code are necessary, and the code is absolutely key to mobile deployment. So there's quite a few things that we are looking at bringing in next year.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Thanks for that, those strategic views. We've got a couple of questions. I just want to turn to, first of all, Alistair Gavin's question, the Minister touched on Sheffield, and he's saying, Alice is asking from Yorkshire, is asking, can you outline the aims and benefits of the Sheffield Flexi Permit Trial and any possible risks you see in that, Richard?
So I'm gonna swerve this one slightly. The details of the trial are still being finalised, but I know I've had discussions with OpenReach, I've had discussions with Sheffield. The collaboration is there, very much the intent is there, and I don't want to steal the thunder of Clive if he's going to mention it in his speech, or indeed Alison in her workshops. So apologies, Asta, I might give that one a miss just until I'll leave it. I'll let you get it straight from the horse's mouth.
Well, hopefully you'll be on later on, so we might be able to touch back with you, Richard, or get a video clip from you if he dodges that one as well. I don't know if you can see the question from Gary Blunt in the tote. There is the issue to do with the ISP transformation of the ISPs in terms of using OpenReach networks. Do you think the power companies will follow the lead and enable ISPs to use the government-funded infrastructure to deploy fibre further and faster into the rural areas? Any
Yes,
thoughts on
thanks,
that?
Gary. So we ran a consultation on this access point recently. Very much a call to evidence on ideas from industry. We've had quite a few ideas through from big and small comms players, and we'll be kind of announcing next steps to that fairly soon. Although I'm not the lead on that, so I should clarify. With regards to kind of wider wayleaves, this is. Again, wayleaves is the gift that keeps on giving. This is all predicated on existing wayleaves and retrospective rights to share and things like that. It's quite a thorny issue, and it's a very complicated one. It's one that we're looking at. In terms of anything announceable, sorry to disappoint you, Gary, nothing yet, but this exact stuff is what we're looking at, especially, with kind of the wider aims of the barrier busting team.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thanks for that. At least there may be some progress going through on that in due course. We've got one, probably the final question we'll take today, Richard, and then let you off the hook. It's a bit of a lengthy question from Tom at Balfour Beatty, talking about progress of Streetworks and the mutual obligations, or should you say the conflicting obligations. And I guess the question at the end is how the government propose to balance these needs to deliver both objectives and reduce the often conflicting environment currently in place. It's rather a general question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is probably a question that also could be asked to DFT. So I won't elaborate on it too much, but I think the changes that we've seen this year and the changes that we will see next year, I think one of the main benefits of them is driving productivity. So that operators are doing more work but on the road for the same amount of time. So for example, if you're doing a traditional build as opposed to say narrow trenching, you're deploying far more infrastructure but within the same, or indeed maybe even a smaller time frame. So I think one of the major benefits that we want to deliver with regards to infrastructure rollout is that productivity side. And so, that encapsulates quite a lot of the work we're doing. Indeed, skills is a key part of that. So my main response to that is, one of the aims of the task force is to increase the pace of rollout. I think productivity goes in hand with that. So we're trying to deliver more infrastructure in the same or indeed smaller time frames.
Okay, all right. Oh, we have one final question from Mark. In terms of timing, does the Flexi Pony trial feel like a good time to be trying such a bold concept?
I think so. No, look. So we've been discussing this with DFT for some time. I enjoy working with DFT. The ambition that they've shown has been really good. Obviously, I'm looking at it from a broadband perspective, and it's been absolutely great working with them. They've delivered so many good things for the broadband industry, and they're going to continue doing that over the next year. So I think this is just an illustration of the priority this government has for infrastructure building. So yes, Mark, it feels like a good time.
Yeah, and I agree with you actually in terms of behind the scenes, what we've seen in terms of DFT thinking on this. I'd strongly support what you've just said there, Richard. It does feel to me like a particularly good time actually, and that's part of the reason we can have this conversation. Actually, with Jag not being on the call, because I think that is, there is a conflicting view there. But I think my observation is that government is lockstep behind us in terms of this approach going forward, and it's just really a question of finding and working out those modalities. Richard, I'm going to let you off the hook there and start drawing this session to a close. I want to touch on one thing you raised there, which is and I think, from you're the sector that you oversee, you touched on the increased performance and reinstatement of the telco area generally, and that's absolutely right that you touch upon that. And I think what's probably music to the ears of many of us on this call is what you have alluded to, which is that increased amount of cross-Whitehall working that in the past has been, many would say has been a little bit absent, and probably in this sector completely non-existent at times. So absolutely bravo, and hats off to you for encouraging that and doing that as well. Can I also say, just for those who are on the call, Richard here is almost without fail on our weekly DFT dial-ins with COVID, and indeed now that those are monthly ones in this particular phase of COVID now, is always there and staying tuned into what's going on. So a true ally of ours, Richard, and thank you for joining us and expressing those answers to some fairly topical and sinewy questions there. So thank you very much indeed. Richard, I'm going to let you off the hook now, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the remainder of the day for the folks on the call. But thank you from us all. Thank you very much indeed. We'll sign you off there, Richard. For others on the call, I just wanted to touch briefly on the remainder of today, which we had verbally spoken about. I just want to share a screen with you. So back here at 1 o'clock for Clive Bairstow to helpfully give us, shall we say, the private sector utility perspective on that. And then later on this afternoon, really driving into this issue, which Richard has talked about here, really, which is that external collaboration. What can we really do? Getting the coves on board here, just to speak about the lessons learned more briefly. And then into tomorrow, the rest of the program you've pretty much seen already and is out there. Do please sign on for anything that you haven't had a chance to already. If there are no further questions, proposals or thoughts from me, I'll sign off and look forward to seeing you back here sharp at 1 o'clock. Thanks very much indeed, and good morning.